I want to have a very real, very honest conversation with you today about what is actually happening to your money right now. Because if you are relying on the traditional financial playbook that our parents used, you are essentially signing up to watch your purchasing power slowly erode. We are sitting in the middle of 2026, and the macroeconomic landscape has shifted so dramatically over the past 12 months that the old definitions of financial security simply do not apply anymore. If you feel like you are working harder, making more nominal dollars, but somehow finding it more difficult to get ahead or build true momentum, I need you to know that you are not crazy. You are experiencing the reality of a modern middle-class trap that is driven by structural inflation, sticky interest rates, and a massive divergence in the economy. Let us look at the actual data without the filter of traditional media hype or overly complex academic theories, because we need to understand the field we are playing on if we want to win. Right now, headline inflation has bounced around the 3.8% to 4% range, driven heavily by persistent energy costs and supply disruptions. While core inflation is stubbornly stuck near 3%, the Federal Reserve has kept its benchmark interest rate elevated between 3.5% and 3.75%. And any hopes for aggressive rate cuts have basically been pushed out past the end of this year. At the same time, we are seeing a massive wave of capital flowing into artificial intelligence infrastructure and data centers, which is keeping corporate earnings for giant tech firms incredibly strong. But that productivity boom is not distributing wealth evenly across the economy. What this creates is a low, hire, low, fire job market where wage growth is flattening out at around 3.5%, while the costs of primary assets like housing, energy, and everyday services remain elevated. When your wages grow at 3.5%, but your cost of living is rising at 4%, you are experiencing a hidden wealth tax every single day. And that is exactly why the traditional savings account is a losing strategy. I am not here to give you some theoretical lecture from an ivory tower or act like a corporate billionaire who forgot what a grocery bill looks like. I am in the trenches with you, navigating the exact same volatility, running my own digital business, and looking at the same market charts every morning. And what I realized early on is that the only way to break out of this structural trap is to shift your mindset from being a consumer to becoming an owner. You have to own productive assets that grow faster than the rate of central bank money printing. And you have to do it with absolute discipline, cutting through all the daily market noise. When you look at the noise on social media right now, everyone is chasing the next hot trend, the next speculative option play, or some obscure meme token trying to turn $100 into $10,000 overnight because they feel desperate. But that desperation is exactly what Wall Street preys on. Real wealth creation in an environment like 2026 is boring. It is mechanical, and it is built on long-term equity ownership. My personal strategy, the exact framework I use with my own capital every single month, is completely centered around bi-weekly dollar cost averaging into broad market index funds, specifically funds like VO, which tracks the SP 500, or VTI, which captures the total United States stock market. I do not try to time the market. I do not try to guess whether the next inflation print is going to be 3.6 or 4.2%, and I do not panic when geopolitical tensions cause a sudden 5% drawdown in the indexes. Instead, I have automated my entire investment infrastructure so that a fixed percentage of my income automatically buys these index funds every 2 weeks, regardless of whether the market is at an all-time high or in a temporary correction. Let us break down exactly why this mechanical approach is so incredibly powerful in a sticky inflation environment. When you buy a total market index fund, you are effectively buying a slice of the largest, most resilient corporations in the world, companies like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, and thousands of others. These companies possess immense pricing power, which means when their input costs rise due to energy spikes or tariff changes, they do not just absorb the loss, they pass those costs onto the consumer by raising prices. As a consumer, that hurts your wallet, but as an equity owner, you are positioned on the receiving side of that transaction because those higher prices translate into sustained corporate revenue and expanding profit margins over time, which ultimately drives the stock market higher by consistently dollar cost averaging. You are turning market volatility into your ultimate advantage. When the market dips, because investors are panicking about sticky Federal Reserve policy, your fixed bi-weekly investment automatically buys more shares at a lower price. When the market rallies on strong artificial intelligence productivity data, your existing portfolio expands in value. You stop worrying about the perfect entry point because you recognize that time in the market always beats trying to time the market. This requires a total liquidation of emotional investing. You have to treat your investment portfolio like a utility bill that must be paid every single month without question. The real reason why most people in our generation struggle to build substantial wealth is not a lack of information. It is a lack of structural discipline. We live in an information ecosystem that is engineered to break our focus and amplify our anxieties. One day you read a headline saying the labor market is slowing down. The next day you see a report about soaring gasoline prices, and your natural human instinct is to pause, to wait for things to settle down before you invest your hard-earned money. But things never truly settle down. There is always a new macroeconomic risk, a new geopolitical conflict, or a new policy shift around the corner. If you wait for the perfect, risk-free economic environment, you will be waiting forever while your cash silently melts away in a banking system that pays you interest rates that cannot even clear the real rate of inflation. After taxes, true financial freedom is not about finding a magic shortcut. It is about building an automated system that works for you while you focus your creative energy on increasing your primary income, whether that is scaling a side hustle, creating content, or climbing the corporate ladder. You maximize your earning potential, control your core living expenses, and channel the surplus directly into productive, wealth-generating assets every single bi-weekly cycle. It is about playing the long game with extreme confidence, recognizing that the compounding effect of the global economy will reward those who stay disciplined and punish those who panic. Let go of the need for instant gratification. Ignore the speculative hype machines and start building your own automated wealth machine today. Consistency is your superpower, asset ownership is your exit ticket from the middle-class trap, and the best time to solidify your strategy is right now. Turn off the noise. Look at the structural realities of the data. Automate your process and let the long-term compounding engine do the heavy lifting for you. We are going to navigate this volatile environment together, building real, tangible wealth step by step, bi-weekly cycle by bi-weekly cycle. Stay focused, stay disciplined, and keep building. You have to realize that the psychological game of investing is actually much harder than the math behind it. The math is remarkably simple. If you invest a few $100s every 2 weeks into an asset class that historically compounding at 8 to 10% annually, you will eventually reach financial independence. But the psychology of watching your hard-earned savings fluctuate in value day after day can be completely paralyzing if you do not have a clear long-term vision. That is why I always tell my friends to stop looking at their investment accounts every single day. When you look at your portfolio daily, you are exposing your brain to constant hits of dopamine and cortisol, which triggers impulsive decisions. If the market is up, you feel a false sense of euphoria and you might be tempted to invest more money than you can actually afford to lock away. If the market is down, you feel a wave of panic and you start thinking about selling everything to preserve your remaining capital. Both of these emotional reactions are toxic to long-term wealth building. By automating your investments through a strict dollar-cost averaging system, you effectively remove human emotion from the equation entirely. You create a structural barrier between your primitive emotional impulses and your long-term financial future. Let us talk about the specific vehicles like VU and VTI, because people always ask me which one is better or how to choose between them. The reality is that both of these funds are incredible financial instruments, and choosing one over the other is far less important than the actual act of consistently investing in either of them. VU tracks the 500 largest companies in the United States, which means you are heavily exposed to the mega-cap technology giants that are driving the current technological revolution. These are global monopolies with massive cash reserves, incredible profit margins, and the ability to weather almost any economic storm. Vermont I, on the other hand, gives you exposure to the entire United States stock market, including mid-cap and small-cap companies, which provides an extra layer of diversification if small-cap companies start to outperform because interest rates eventually stabilize. Vermont I will capture that growth while VU remains concentrated in the heavyweights. I personally hold a massive core position in these types of broad index funds because I want my wealth tied to the aggregate ingenuity and productivity of the entire economic system, rather than gambling on individual corporate management teams. When you buy individual stocks, you are taking on concentrated company-specific risk. You have to constantly read quarterly earnings reports, analyze balance sheets, track executive turnover, and try to guess whether a competitor is going to disrupt their business model. For 99% of people who have full-time jobs, families, and creative passions, that level of active management is simply not sustainable or efficient. Your most valuable asset is your time and your attention. And wasting hundreds of hours trying to beat the market usually results in underperformance anyway. The data shows us year after year that the vast majority of professional hedge fund managers who have millions of dollars in resources and supercomputers cannot consistently beat the SP 500 over a 10 to 15-year horizon. So if the professionals who do this for 14 hours a day cannot beat the index, why should you and I waste our weekends trying to do it? It makes infinitely more sense to accept the market return through low-cost index funds and focus our valuable time on maximizing our active income streams. Think about how much energy you could unlock if you stopped stressing about market timing and instead poured that creative focus into building a scalable digital product. Improving your professional skill set or expanding your own content platform, your primary income is the ultimate engine of your wealth creation because it dictates how much capital you can shove into your automated investment machine every 2 weeks. If you are only able to invest $50 a month, even 100% return will not change your life. But if you can scale your income to the point where you are comfortably deploying $1,000 or $2,000 into the market every single biweekly cycle, the compounding effect becomes absolute magic within a decade. That is the real secret of the new generation of wealthy creators and professionals. We focus heavily on the income generation side and then completely automate the wealth preservation and growth side through broad passive market equity ownership. We do not let our lifestyles inflate faster than our earnings, and we do not buy liabilities disguised as assets, just to impress strangers on social media. The current economic environment of 2026 is definitely challenging, but it also represents a massive transfer of wealth from those who are passive consumers to those who are disciplined owners. Every time you buy a product, pay a subscription fee, or pump gasoline into your car, you are transferring your hard-earned capital to the shareholders of those respective corporations. The question you need to ask yourself is whether you want to remain exclusively on the consumer side of that ledger, or if you want to claim your rightful seat on the ownership side. When you become an equity owner, you start looking at the world through a completely different lens. You stop viewing inflation as just an existential threat and start viewing it as a force that accelerates the nominal value of the corporate assets you own. You develop a deep sense of financial sovereignty because you know that no matter what the central banks do, no matter what politicians promised, and no matter how volatile the daily headlines become, your automated wealth engine is quietly, consistently working for you in the background. So let us make a commitment right here, right now, to stop chasing shortcuts, to stop listening to the speculative noise, and to build a rock-solid financial foundation based on empirical data, long-term discipline, and mechanical consistency. Automate your biweekly investments, ruthlessly optimize your active income, and let time do the heavy lifting. We are going to navigate this changing landscape together, building true financial independence step by step, pay period by pay period. Stay disciplined, stay focused, and keep building your future.